Welcome to the Eyes Up Mindset podcast, where we explore what it means to grow daily and find our best in every aspect of life.
Welcome back to another episode of the Eyes Up Mindset podcast. I'm John Shirkey, here with my friend, my co-host, Jamie Wagner. Jamie, I heard a podcast the other day about gesturing and how using your hands helps people understand you better and also you express yourself better. So I'm trying it out here. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my hands gesturing at Jamie.
John, I really appreciate that because I am a incredibly demonstrative person while I talk. My students would often give me a hard time about how big a lot of my gestures were and how active I can't stand in one place either. So it's movement, it's hands, it's like I was kind of all over the place, but I appreciate the gestures. What was the gist of the podcast? Like that it was, what was the point?
Well, see, now you put me on the spot, Jamie, and I don't really remember. But it was a next big idea podcast, not to promote them, but we've talked about them before. Where
that's an awesome podcast.
They bring on authors who have written books about just about everything, that is interesting. And then they pick out the main concepts from those books and have the author talk about them, which is really cool. So if you have not listened to that podcast, even though there's no free ads, It is a free ad. Here you go. The next big idea. I think it was about how our brains work, how we learn, how we remember things. And so she was talking about how gestures really do potentially help. And what caught my attention, I was working on the house, and that's when I listen to a lot of stuff that I listen to is when I'm working, I'm doing other things. And so it really connected for me because it was like, I'm always doing something. I learn best and retain the most when I'm doing something else and listening. I don't read books as like you sit down and open a book. I listen to most of my books while I'm driving, working on the house, those sorts of things. And so it really was an encouragement to, and if you're out there and if you're like, man, I always have to have a pen or I'm always fidgeting, we've been kind of told throughout the years of like, hey, sit down. Like it starts in school, right? Where it's like, and it's changed, but most of us, it's like, hey, sit still, pay attention, don't talk, don't move, write down what you need to write down, and everything's going to be fine.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of hardwiring in that where we've been hardwired to kind of work out the kinesthetic, the movement stuff, like when it's appropriate, right? Like,
right. And
go on a walk, go get out of the house, go do something physical, go be active somewhere. And yet that's not how our brains make connections. It would be my guess as to a little bit of what the podcast is working on. And some of my research, I've absolutely seen that too. There's a really cool book called Shop Class as Soul Craft by Matthew Crawford that talks about how working with your hands is really like transformative, developmental stuff. And so you're talking about working on your house, listening at the same time. That makes a ton of sense to me because that process of work, thinking, connective, creativity all comes together when we're moving, and so I go ahead.
No, I think about that in, my mental health practice too. I structure it in terms, not in a non-traditional way on purpose, partly because of me. And I don't like to sit in one place and just talk it out necessarily, so with my clients, and some of the best work that I've ever done was in a residential facility where we were going for a bike ride. We were playing basketball. We were shooting pool because we were doing multiple things at once, entertaining our physical being while we were able to think and talk and communicate and connect. And anyway, that's not at all what our conversation was going to be about, Jamie, but before we hit record, you were talking all this science stuff to me and so my brain got going on that. But anyway, hey, this is Thanksgiving week. It's just Jamie and I shouldn't say just Jamie and I. It is Jamie and I this week. No guest. We're excited to just be together to have a conversation and talk a little bit about what it means to be grateful and thankful for our lives.
Yeah. And we, had our college football coach on episode 10, Coach Steve Johnson. And he had a phrase that came from his dad. And we've said it before on this show. And it if you know anything about Bethel football, it is kind of the underlying theme of that program in the course of the last 30 years. Is happy as a man who is grateful. And what we mean by that is that when we take the time to think about the things that we're thankful for, grateful for, right? We can talk about the holiday of Thanksgiving and all that stuff. And you and I have some conversations about holidays being an obligatory family sort of things that may not be good for everyone, right? That might not be a good thing for everybody to have to do. But the practice, the act of identifying where we are grateful, where we are thankful, is super productive for a happier life. And not in some trite, simple way, but in a transformative sort of way. And, maybe there's some trite simpleness in it too, but not in a cynical way, I guess. And so my challenge is to think about, this week, what is it we're grateful for? And maybe to have some insight into our own heads for the two of us, what it is that we're going to spend some time reflecting on. And I think what's interesting is that introductory conversation you guys were just a party to is kind of, what I'm grateful for in our relationship, between John and I, is like, he's listening to stuff that maybe I haven't listened to yet. He's reading stuff I haven't read yet, having conversations I haven't had with other people. And then it's like, let's rinse it together, Yeah. So that's really cool.
So you mentioned our football coach, and the story that always comes to my mind, and I'm sure yours as well. He tells a story, and he is an incredible storyteller. So if you ever get to hear him speak, or we'll have him on and maybe we'll just make him tell the story, Jamie, because I think it would, I would love to hear it. Anytime I can hear him speak, I'm in. So, but he tells a story about growing up outside of Chicago. His dad was a pastor, and going to McDonald's with him. And every time they went, his dad would get so excited, and he's just like, he's loud. He's excited. He's like, we get to have Big Macs today, right? We're going to have a Big Mac, Steve-O. Like, I can just hear it in my head. And the simple thing of going to have a Big Mac, anybody in the world can go have a Big Mac for the most part, right? Like, you can go to any McDonald's and they're all over the place and get a Big Mac. But every time he was so excited for the opportunity. And that's what sticks with me, is the opportunity. And I think we talk about eyes up mindset and living eyes up. And really, for me, what it comes down to, for me, is my core is having a mindset of opportunities and solutions, and not problems and barriers. Because that is my own personal baggage. My own personal growth is that my brain is wired to go to the barriers, and sometimes I just let it go there, right? And so that's my work. But anyway, that's the story behind, happy as a man with a grateful heart. But sorry, you were gonna.
No, I think so. In the last couple of weeks, speaking to teams here at the end of the season, is to look at it as an opportunity, right? To look at these moments. Pressure is a privilege, right? That's, again, kind of a quaint, trite phrase that everybody says and all this, but pressure is a privilege. You've earned the opportunity to be in this position. You can look at it as, oh man, we have to play a really good team. We have to compete against the best out there to get from our section into the state competition, or from the state into the state finals, or whatever it is. But that is an opportunity to prove yourself to no one else but yourself, right? And to say, oh, I get a chance. It's the Big Mac thing. Whoa, we get to compete against the absolute best. Now I get to find out who I am, right? Now I get to find out what I'm made of. And if that mirror reflects, maybe I'm not there yet, then we go Jocko, right? Then we go Jocko Willink, and we say, good, period. Good. I'm not there yet. Now I know exactly where I have the work to do. Or if I find out I am good enough, now it's good. I get another opportunity to test myself against the next best thing. And so that's a message I've been given in the last couple of weeks to teams, and say, opportunity, not barrier, right? Oh, this team is really good that you're going to go play. Yeah, absolutely they are. That's an awesome opportunity.
And I think part of that comes back to, and I was just having a conversation with, sorry, total aside, I'm a little squirrely right now, Jamie, but it's really cool how we have these conversations on our podcast and we develop these sort of relationships. We had John Peter on a few weeks ago, and you knew him before, and then you developed a closer relationship. And now, like, I feel like he's my friend too. Right. And I could call him and run stuff by him. Anyway, I was having a conversation with Joel Cochran, who was on an episode a long time ago. And he reminded me of the language thing. He's a big language guy, where it's like, can you get yourself to say, I get to, instead of I have to? And when you write it down, I have to play against the best competition. I have to go get groceries this week, right? Instead saying I get to. And how does that change the emotion, the thought, the feeling? And, we've talked before where our thoughts impact how we feel, and how we feel impacts how we react and the results that we get. And so just changing that simple word is something that you get to, right? You get to do. But in order to make it a habit, and in order to ingrain that, it can't just be with we're going to play the best of the best. I get to, right? Because those times, usually it's a little easier to do because it's big, it's broad, right? But can you get to the place where I get to have a Big Mac, I get to go get groceries, I get to change this diaper of my kid that is all dirty and it's everywhere?
Well, think about that. We get to have a Big Mac today, Steve. Big Macs, we get Big Mac. Like, it's not, what am I going to have today? It's this is what I get to eat and consume today. And this is what I get to take in today. I think so much, and then you talked about your thoughts impacting your feelings and your feelings impacting your actions. I think we just talked about how our gestures create connections and our body language creates connections in our brain to deepen and to have that emotional resonance from a thought. It deepens the neurological pathway also, right? It changes the chemical response in our brain. So we get more of the reward chemical or the fear chemical or whatever it is. So when we rephrase get to from have to, what does it do to our body language? It opens us up. It creates more joy and happiness. And then we communicate that out to the world. We get that back. Also, it's just this really cool, amazing, really power that is this virtuous cycle that grows and grows and grows the more we give to it. And we've been fortunate enough. We started another podcast that we mentioned where we're highlighting our alma mater, and we've talked about the head football coach there, Steve Johnson, but we're doing some sports stuff. And one of the coolest things about that, the conversations we've been able to have, is how when you give, you get. When you give, you get. And so when you're given really great juice with your body language, people are coming back to you with that. And it's not from one person, it's from a lot of people. And so you might not get in one interaction all that you're giving, all the joy, but over the course of the day and a ton of interactions, it fills you up way more than you can imagine. Kind of that cup overflows.
Couldn't have said it better, Jamie. You give, you get, right? And I think that's an underrated part of being grateful is understanding that you've got to give first, right? You have to.
No question. And when you come with a grateful heart, there is something to give, right? There is something on the plate that you're like, oh, this is the thing that's in front of me. And this is the thing I have to give away, because now you're looking at it as, oh, this is positive. Right. And then there's a book by Sean Aker called The Happiness Advantage. And he's got a really awesome TED Talk also. And one of the things he talks about is how we're just better and positive than negative, neutral, or stress. Well, when you start a gratitude practice, which I've talked about a little bit before on here from me, I just sit down and I write 3 things I'm grateful for every day. I write 2 things that were good yesterday that happened in my life that I'm looking, and then I write 1 thing I'm curious about. And what that is intended to do, and it really comes from the Sean Aker book, is it's intended to say, I want to start noticing the good things in my life. I want to start paying attention there, because our natural instinct, as you talked about, John, is to go negative. We're incentivized by our biology to look for negative because we want to stay safe. We don't want to put ourselves at risk, right? Exactly. And so when we have to rewire that chemistry, and we got to actually like intentionally come back all the way to episode 1. We got to get super purposeful, super intentional about creating gratitude and positive things in our life. You don't have to do what I do, but when I come to that place in the morning and I write stuff down, the rest of my day, I'm actually hunting those things out for tomorrow. And when I miss a few days, I stop looking for it.
Yeah. And I think that's an incredible tool, Jamie. And I think there's a lot of people who have started some version of that. And it doesn't have to be that. You mentioned that. For me, I sort of practice gratitude around, we'll call them triggers or certain events or things that are happening in my life. So for me, anytime I'm at a game or anytime I hear the national anthem, right, it is a trigger for me. Because back when I was coaching, I would pray. I would be thankful for the opportunity to compete and for my guys and to be able to serve in that way. And then, I think, so again, that's just one example for me, like the national anthem and really whatever you feel about the national anthem, this is not political at all. It's a trigger for me. It's an event that creates a response where it reminds me to think about and be intentional, right? Another one for me is hunting. I just got done elk hunting a couple of weeks ago, and being outside and being in nature reminds me to be grateful. We had an opportunity, Jamie. I think we've told this story maybe at some point along the way. If not, I apologize, but where we were deer hunting one day and we had an incredibly successful hunt and we stopped. It was really freaking cold. We looked up, it was completely black except for a billion stars. There was no sound. And it was the 5 of us standing there, which created an opportunity for us to really gain some perspective of, man, we're really small and this is really freaking cool. Right. And so again, that for me, hunting, being in nature, being out creates opportunities to think and remind myself of the perspective of, man, I'm really not that big and I can be really grateful for the things and the places that I get to be.
And I think one of the things that I've learned, it's been a month and a half since I've been able to run because my knee is still messed up. And one of the things that I loved about running was the fact that I was outside, number one, but it was a chance for me to say, I'm really grateful that I'm out here, but I'm also really grateful that my body is healthy enough to do it. Now, in the absence of it, I'm even more grateful that I had that opportunity to do it because for me, it's hard to be like, oh, I'm going to do push-ups and sit-ups, or I'm going to stay fit in this way, or I want to get out and walk or whatever. And I do some of those things. I am active, but it's not the same. And so that 20th minute, that 25th minute, that 30th minute out running, when it gets a little bit mundane, it's like, no, be grateful here because it's pretty cool. Like, it's pretty cool to get here and not be exhausted, but maybe just bored, and then to reframe the boredom and say, oh, that's really cool too.
Yeah. So whatever it is for you out there listening, it's not about doing what I do or what Jamie does. It's about paying attention to the people around you, to the things around you, and seeking opportunities and solutions rather than barriers and obstacles. And Jamie, I think I tell you most times at the end of the podcast, I appreciate you and being on this journey with me and challenging me. And you really, really piss me off sometimes, to be honest. And sometimes you bore the crap out of me with, even the conversation at the beginning of this, before we hit record, we're talking about physics.
And Einstein and
Jamie, I
don't care. Yeah.
But in the end, I know that our connection and our relationship is filling me up, and I appreciate that. And we talk about our listeners, Jamie. We couldn't do this without them. We're incredibly grateful for the opportunity to interview incredible people, share that message, and hopefully help improve people's lives along the way.
Well, it's an opportunity for us to give, and if we'd be remiss, we'd be awful people in some ways if we didn't identify that this thing, the thing that we do, is an opportunity to give. But man, we get a lot. We get a ton. The experts, the people that are on this journey that have poured into the listeners through the conversation that we've gotten to have, I guarantee you I'm being poured into also. It's through you, it's through the people that are now friends and get the relationships. You're talking, you got to go and hang out with Coach Daniel Jones from Montana State. And I said to my wife that night, I'm like, I got to get out to Bozeman and go just hang out with those guys. Like, I got to go hang out with Daniel, because in that hour that we got to talk to him, hour and a half, I learned so much. I want more, and so can we stop and say, this thing that we do, whatever it is that we do, does give us something, and then open ourselves up to give back to it. This podcast has been great for that. And it's opened my eyes to that in a bunch of different ways in the rest of my life, but I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still working at it and getting better all the time. And I think you guys are out there with us doing the exact same thing. So from us to you, we are grateful big time for getting to do this, and that you guys show up as consistently as you do.
And we would love to hear from you. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, which our analytics say that most of you are. So this is you. If you're listening on Apple, click on the little button that says write a review, hit the 5 stars if you think there's value, and write something in there about what you get from this, because it's helpful for us, but it's also helpful for others to understand what we are about and what we're trying to do. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's the same thing. Put a little comment. If you don't use either one of those things, send us an email, eyesupmindset@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you and how you are practicing gratitude. And even if it's just one thing, hey, I'm grateful for X, man, that's going to pour up into us, and it's going to give you, even just by giving a little, it's going to give you in return.
Yeah, man. Awesome stuff.
Cool, man. Happy Thanksgiving. I'm grateful for you. I love you. And as always, live eyes up.